Hello, hello. We're going to get started soon. I think we're slightly earlier, but I saw some people waiting, so thank you. Hello. I see a few people online already. I'm a little bit nervous, but thank you for accompanying me. We have Naveen, Introption, we have Tony. Hi, Stephen. Yes, please smash the like button. I saw. Um, no, I really appreciate your company. Thank you so much. Hello, Kumaran. OC Bosco. Thank you. We have Rakesh from earlier. We have Peter. Hello. So we're gonna get going soon. I did promise at 9 o'clock, so might be good to just wait a little bit more. Hello, thank you so much. I definitely hope that we'll be able to go through some of the questions, and I can help answer some of them. I think what I want to promise is I'll try my best to answer the questions, or if not, I will definitely provide some additional resources. Hello, Iris. Hello, Abhay. Hello, Harsh. And there's Vinay. Hello, Om. And there's Jewel. Thank you so much. Karen. Hi, Karen. Thank you for joining. I know it is a Sunday, so thank you. Hello, Niharika. And we have Yaparla. We have Manuela. Thank you. I have a couple more minutes. We're gonna get started soon. But if you have any questions that you kind of want to queue up, please feel free to do so. Again, I'm gonna try to get to some of the questions. I did get some questions ahead of the session, so I'd like to address those as well. Are there any new updates in Tableau Desktop? The most recent one, the most recent version is 2022.4. And in the past, so I can't speak for Tableau. I'm not an official spokesperson for Tableau. But in the past, Tableau usually has quarterly updates. So in the past, typically in the first quarter of the calendar year is when they release the new version. So I definitely would, as an end user, I would expect that somewhere towards maybe March is when the new version will come up. That's just based on what I've observed in the past, and I am not an official Tableau spokesperson. Oh, my LinkedIn ID is I believe it's Donabel Santos. There you go. So thank you for. I also want to say thank you for a lot of the really nice and thoughtful comments in my channel. I do read them. I apologize. Sometimes I can't respond to a lot of the comments and the questions, but I read them. They really are very, very kind and thoughtful. So I really thank you. Really thank you. So I really appreciate them. And yes, I'm hoping that they will help, whether you're preparing for an interview or preparing for the certification, or just working on a project. I'm really hoping those videos are helpful. I did also get a comment yesterday that I haven't been posting videos for a while. I did get sick late last year, and I kind of had to slow down. But I'm hoping to start posting some additional videos, hopefully by this week, next week. I'm also preparing for my Tableau server certification exam. I'm not a Tableau admin. I might be a super user. I might be a site administrator, but it's not a product that I'm intimately familiar with. So I'm making it pretty open. I'm documenting my studying process. I will be sharing some of my notes as I organize them. So for any of you who might be interested on the server side, I probably will be posting additional videos on the server side too. But there's a lot of pieces on the server side, so I think it will take me a little bit of time to organize them. And again, thank you so much. And so I do have some questions. So maybe I do see some questions, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just get started on a very quick tutorial on calculations. This is a question that I get a lot on the comments in the videos, but I did want to say again, hello, good morning, thank you. I see a number of you have joined. Thank you so much. These are also going to be recorded, so they'll be posted in my YouTube channel. So if you ever wanted to review some of the pieces, I'll leave that there, and I'll probably just get kind of a highlight reel of some of the questions and then kind of put them so there's a shorter segment and there's kind of the full segment. Let's get started with just a quick overview on calculations. And I do see a few questions already coming in, and I'll try to address them. Again, I just want to preface this with, I am not an official Tableau spokesperson. I am a Tableau trainer. I am a Tableau customer. I've been a Tableau customer for a really long time. So what I can offer are my own thoughts on the subject. So in here for the calculation, reviewing the calculated fields, again, especially if you're just brand new to Tableau, these are probably the questions that you're asking. What are these calculated fields? Calculated fields are essentially new fields. They're derived fields. And the reason we create calculated fields is because this information doesn't exist in your data source. Actually, let me just turn off the music. I apologize for that. I also received a lot of comments around the background music. So thank you for those comments. As a brand new YouTuber at that time, I read a lot of or I watched a lot of the tutorials, and a lot of people commented, oh, the background music and the choice of background music. So now I know, because my channel is all about the tutorials, that the background music probably is not ideal, or maybe making sure that the volume is really low. So the newer tutorials, they will not have background music. So I don't want to impede on people consuming the content. Anyway, going back, calculated fields. Calculated fields are very similar to how you would derive new fields or new values in other tools as well. So for example, in Excel, when you're creating an expression, that's very similar to the calculated fields in Tableau. And again, the reason for calculated fields is because we don't have them in the data source. Ideally, in an ideal world, all of the fields that you need, they're going to be in your data source. But that's not the case, and there's also situations where we're trying to answer questions that may not be anticipated in your data source. So the calculated fields really make it very flexible to work with the data, analyze the data, and then present your data. So calculated fields, how do we create calculated fields? With calculated fields, let me just see, I think there's a little bit of a lag, but just in case there's a lag, again, I'm just going to be posting kind of a summary of these. So how do we create calculated fields? The thing with Tableau, I think the more you work with Tableau, the more you realize there's more than one way to do things. And it's the same with calculated fields. So calculated fields, there's at least 4 ways of creating them. So the first one is, you can create them from the sidebar. By the way, I'll demo all of these later on. You can create them from the sidebar. You can right-click on a field and then create calculated field from there. You can even go to the menus. If you're more comfortable going to the menu, you can go to the menu. So analysis menu, there's an option to create calculated field there as well. With Tableau, though, there is another way of creating a calculated field, which is more of an ad hoc calculation. ad hoc meaning it's impromptu, and a lot of times we kind of think of something and we just want to try out how do we get that value. So that's what Tableau calls an ad hoc calculation. Now, when we create an ad hoc calculation in Tableau, all you need to do is double click on columns, an empty space in your columns shelf, or an empty space in your row shelf, or an empty space in your marks card. And when you double click, it becomes a text box. And that's when you can start putting in or trying out some of your expressions. Again, I'll demonstrate this, all of these shortly, but I at least kind of just wanted to share some of these. Now, when you open up a calculated field editor, the calculated field editor is what we call a modeless editor. So the modeless editor, meaning we can keep that editor open while we're working through some other things. And this is, to me personally, this is a very powerful feature, because a lot of times you are thinking of a new value or a new field, but you may not necessarily know exactly what the expression is. So I've been working with Tableau for a few years, but I still do, quite a bit of trial and error, especially if it's a calculated field that involves many different expressions or many different functions. So it is very helpful to keep that editor on open, and then try it out and then see it, and not having to close and open the editor all the time. So again, I will demonstrate some of these shortly. Now, before we go to a very, very brief demo, I also see a lot of comments in the channel about specific types of calculation. Tableau supports three major types, or three different kinds of calculation. The first one is called basic, and basic means this is row at the row level. It's against your data source. So if your data source is an Excel file, this calculation gets applied to all of the rows in that Excel file, or if it's a relational database. Or it can also be an aggregation. Aggregation meaning, you have to group the data somehow. So it might be a grand total, it might be a subtotal. So that's what Tableau calls the basic calculation. However, the other two types of calculations in Tableau, again, to me personally, this makes Tableau a really powerful tool. The table calculations are calculations against your viz. So what does that mean? Well, if I have a line chart, the line chart is really made up of numbers. If I have a bar chart, the bar chart is really made up of numbers. So the table calculation is another calculation on top of the numbers that make up your viz. So again, it's against the viz. And that's why when we talk about table calculations, they often say, this is a very, it depends on a lot of things. It's a very sensitive calculation, because the moment I move things around, if I change my layout, if I add a filter, my table calculations are so dependent on those numbers that when you change any one of those things, there's going to be a ripple effect. It's going to recalculate. So I think the table calculations are very, very powerful. I do see a lot of examples where people now tend to navigate towards the other type, which is level of detail expressions. But I think there are use cases where what you need is a table calculation. And for us as the data professionals, as the data analysts or the designers, we just need to know how it works so that we don't accidentally fall into the trap of displaying something that we don't mean to display. The last type of calculation in Tableau is what we call LODs, level of detail expressions. I remember when this was first introduced, this was kind of like our magic bullet to a lot of things, because it did simplify a lot of our calculations in the past. But again, I think these three types, you have the basic, which is either row or aggregate level. You also have the table calculation and the level of detail expression. Again, these are very powerful tools. We just need to know when to use them. Okay. And I'm going to do a quick demo. But before I go through a demo, I did see a number of questions. Let me just make sure I at least address some of the questions first. So I think there was a question from what is the best roadmap to learn Tableau fast? Personally, I would say, when I started with Tableau, again, this was a long time ago. There weren't a lot of resources, so for me personally, I had to either download my own data sets, create my own data sets, and then kind of imagine scenarios. What if the manager wants to know this? And then I try to create some of those in Tableau. So I think the best roadmap really is practicing. It may not be ideal because it does take time, but but I think with Tableau, the moment you start working through it, the more you're going to understand how it works, and the more it's going to be second nature trying to answer the questions using the tool. So also, Tableau now has a very, very good online documentation. So I definitely would encourage you take a look at the online documentation. There's a lot of free resources out there, and I guess shameless plug. Take a look at some of my videos too. But I think with that, so the combination of the online documentation, there's a lot of great YouTube videos out there, and then I definitely would encourage you, just get your feet wet, download the data set, see what you can get. And you'll know whether you're on the right path or the wrong path. But um, making mistakes is part of the learning. That's how we remember things. So I definitely would encourage that. um, I did have another question in here. Is there a way to send Tableau dashboard as format PDF or PNG as emails to specific users? Um, there is, but it is going to be a combination of. So for me, we have a lot of dashboards where we send what we call subscriptions, but for that it requires that we have Tableau server. So in Tableau server you can set up your subscriptions already. Now you usually would enter the people who are supposed to receive that PDF file or that email into the Tableau server subscription. You could also automate this. So if you're working on the server, you can create some scripts that automatically download the data and then download the PDF file. And once you've downloaded the PDF file, again, in the same script, you can send that email over. That is an alternative. My personal experience is with PowerShell. So I use PowerShell. I actually use another command on the server called tab cmd, and I kind of just call that tab cmd from my PowerShell script, and then you can schedule the PowerShell script, and it's a lot more flexible because now you're kind of integrated to a lot of other kind of network items. I'm not sure again if that answers your question, but I think the server, if you have the server, you can just set up the subscription. That's the easiest way to move forward. There is one more question: how to speed up the loading of Tableau while in live connection. When I think there's a few factors to consider when it's a live connection. First is, what is your data source? Also, how fast is your data source? Because if, for example, your data source itself is very slow. So let's say if I have a database, a SQL database that's living on a really old machine and I don't have the best internet connection, unfortunately, there's only so much we can do on the Tableau side. So usually when we're working with live connection, we have to, in a way, kind of take a lens higher and look at a bigger picture. So apart from Tableau, what are the other pieces there? So there's going to be the network, there's going to be firewall, there will be the infrastructure as well. So where is your desktop? If you're mentioning maybe loading Tableau on a Tableau desktop, your own computer and your own hardware and software in your computer will affect kind of the loading. So again, there's a lot of pieces I think that's included. The one thing I would mention though is just make sure that when we are connecting to another data source, whether it's live or an extract, is we are limiting it to the data that we need. Because sometimes we might connect to a data warehouse that has 50 years worth of data, but you're only analyzing the last 10 years. What we want to do is we want to limit the data that is going to be ingested into Tableau in the first place. So I think that will also already help in terms of performance, like limit the data before it gets through to Tableau. So how is Tableau going to be compared with Power BI? I feel like this is going to be I can offer my own insights and my own opinion. I think these tools are both comparable and could be complementary. I think sometimes it depends on the organization. So, for example, if the organization is already very into the Microsoft ecosystem, then I would assume that the first tool that they might consider would be Power BI because it's already within that ecosystem. Now, if, for example, an organization is not really too much into that Microsoft ecosystem, they may still consider Tableau. But again, I think there are different strengths of both tools. Tableau, very, very strong on the analysis, the exploration, and the visualization side. There's so much flexibility on Tableau. However, Power BI, again, is also a very strong tool, and both tools have been improving over the last few years. So I think it is. I think they're comparable tools. They have different strengths for sure, and I think they will thrive and live in different environments. Um, it might be a non-answer, but I'm happy to see feedback from others as well. So, I think we've answered a few of the questions. So what I'd like to do, I'm just going to quickly demo on the basic calculations, just kind of to wrap up this quick demo. So let me just switch to this. So first, calculated fields. How do I create them? So the first way is on the sidebar. You can click on that arrow right beside the search. Let me just highlight this 1 second. So this one. So you can click on that, and you can create a calculated field from here. Or you can also right click on any of the fields, create, and then create a calculated field from here. So second way. Third way, you go to the analysis menu at the very top, and from here you can create a calculated field. The fourth way is what we call the ad hoc calculations, and that is when we can double click on an empty area in your columns or your rows. So double click on columns, it becomes like a pill or a text box, and then double click on columns or rows or empty space in your marks card. Again, what this does is it helps you just visualize. Sometimes we just have an idea and we just want to try. Okay, well, maybe I'm looking for what is 15% of profit. Maybe it's just a matter of calculation. So as long as you're comfortable with the expression, you can start typing it in. So again, I'm looking for 50%. It's like 0.15%, and again, that's what it's going to look like. And now I have my answer. Now for the ad hoc calculations, maybe I want to keep it, or maybe I don't want to keep it. Your ad hoc calculations only live on the current worksheet. So if I go create another worksheet, that 15% of my profit doesn't exist anymore. But if I wanted to keep it, I can simply drag it to the side. Okay, so in here, it basically becomes one of my official calculated fields. Now, let me just quickly talk about the calculated field editor. So on the drop down, create calculated field editor. What this does is it opens up this window. This window allows you to Tableau allows you to keep this open and work on your expressions, and also have it show in the background. Again, personally for me, I love this feature. So for example, I'm looking at category. I can simply drag and drop the fields that I need, or maybe I can just start typing something and I'm going to see this it's like intelligence, the drop down of possible matches. And while I'm at this, if I simply click on apply, what's going to happen is it's going to create the calculated field already, and I can even start using that calculated field again. And I don't have to close this because maybe I'm not quite done yet. So if I simply drag this over, I can now start seeing, all the different combinations of whatever I'm creating. Now, when you have calculated fields, a lot of times we're going to have a combination of fields. Maybe there's going to be a constant value. So for example, between categories of category, maybe I want to have a space, a dash, a space, and then another plus sign. This is called string concatenation. So I can click on apply, and then again I can kind of start seeing that that's what happens in my background. What we also have are a series of functions. So this little arrow on the right hand side, that arrow is expandable. That is the list of functions that Tableau supports. So again, in here, this function. Again, these are the different types of functions. There are functions specifically for numbers. There are functions specifically for strings or text. Functions specific for dates, for type conversions. Again, I think especially when you're preparing for an exam or preparing for an interview, sometimes what happens is we're too nervous, too hung up on knowing what the different details are. If I was the employer, again, I want to preface this with not all employers are going to think the same way. But if I was an employer, I would be more interested in how resourceful you will be. Because I don't expect you to memorize all of these things, because all of these things are, you can look them up, but I need to know that you know how to look for the solution, and that you know how to validate what you're creating, what your data is, and that you also know how to ask questions. Sometimes, and for me, I always get questions, I always get requests, but it's not always very clear. So knowing how to clarify what the requirements are, sometimes also what happens is we have a different language. The way I understand the data, the way I understand the fields in my database might be very different from how maybe our stakeholders understand our data. So again, at least in my experience, there always needs to be some kind of conversation or clarification if, for example, you're being given a directive. So if I ask you, how profitable are we? There are so many variables around being profitable or what that means. And sometimes it also helps to know the context. Why are we asking the question? Of course, we don't always have the privilege of knowing why they're asking the question, but I think it's always worth an ask. But anyway, so these are for the calculated fields. Again, for here, what we can do is look through the functions and then see which one might be helpful for us. And I think just one more tip before we go to some additional questions. What I also find, especially when I'm working on a lot of calculated fields, what I also find helpful is describing the worksheet. I work with a team of people who work with Tableau. So sometimes they have to go into my dashboard and they have to troubleshoot my dashboard, or vice versa. I might need to go in and take a look at what's happening with their dashboards. So if you don't know all the pieces that went into a chart, let's say, I find it very helpful to start with describing the worksheet. So for example, in here, I have one that is called calculation one. Maybe let's throw in our sum of our 15% of profit. So now I have two things going on in here. I will probably start with going to the worksheet tab first, and then describing the sheet. There's also a shortcut. It's Control E. So if I go to this, at the very least, what it will give me is almost like a summary. I don't have to right click to each of the calculated fields, right click edit calculation to figure out what that formula is. Right now, any of the calculated fields that are used in that specific worksheet, that's kind of my summary here. Again, it's kind of an overview of what's happening in that worksheet. So I know a lot of people probably don't use this. I personally use this, especially if I encounter a brand new worksheet. So let's take a look at some additional questions. There's a question. I created a calculated field using fixed LOD. Now I want to create a top 15 list based on this field. Unfortunately, it only works until I close the app, then it crashes. Oh. Um, so when you close Tableau and then when you open it back up, it doesn't work anymore. Um, I think first, I, I think that it probably should work, but there are things that maybe to check. This one, unless I have the workbook, I'm not sure if I can give any specific answers. Some of the things that I notice in my workbooks, especially if I have extracts, um, sometimes what I do is I just recreate some of the extracts. So, for example, in here, if I created an extract right now, what happens in my workbook is sometimes it pretty much, so when you create an extract, sometimes what happens is that extract gets saved into a temp folder. So in your temp folder, if for example you clean your temporary files, that extract gets cleaned out and you might get some errors. I'm not sure if it's going to be related, but maybe as a first step, maybe just checking where the extract is. So for example, right now in here, if I right click on that data source that is my extract, I can go to my properties. A lot of times, again, if you do this on a TWBX file, what you're going to find in here is this goes to a temp folder. And, and sometimes for me, that's the cause of my issues. So I'm not 100% sure if I can give any specific guidance on this, but I would probably start with that because I think the what's a little bit different is it crashes. So I'm curious about kind of the crashing part. Is that because of the calculation? Is that because of other things in the worksheet? Or is that because of maybe hardware or software? It could be any combination of those. So, but I'm happy if you have it in a sample in Tableau Public. Um, I'm more than happy to take a look at it, or maybe cover that in the next live Q&A if you're okay with us demonstrating that. Um, there is a question. I know how to use calculated fields and LOD. Let us say 1420. But my problem is on the design and choosing color, using buttons, icons. I would love to know more where I can do the latter and customize my images for my dashboards. Um, there are a lot of really good resources. I can definitely share some of them. Canva actually has a lot of really good resources just on. Let me just take a look. I should be able to pull up Canva. So we have learn. Yeah, let me just try to see. There are a lot of resources. I can't pick it up right now, but here is one. Canva is one good resource for design. Let me just see. We also have very recently, I was looking at. Yeah, so I think in terms of resources, Canva is one. For icons, the Noun project is very good. But I think just one thing to note when we are looking at different kinds of resources, um, just make sure we are familiar with the license agreement. So, for example, for the Noun project, this is all about different kinds of icons, and again, like this is like over 5 million icons. You're probably gonna find one that you need, but there are license agreements. So, using this, making sure that you have uh, the attribution if you're not on a subscription basis. So that one, in terms of callers, there are a lot of resources. I think one would be coolers is one. So if you sometimes what we need is just really an inspiration, and this one actually kind of already gives us some palettes that we can work with. Also, what I would probably say is if you're working with a company and they already have their own brand, I would probably recommend start with that. Maybe their logo, maybe their usual photos, and then maybe draw the color combination from them, and that might help as a starting point. Again, there's also a lot of guidelines in terms of design. Maybe what I'll do, I'll just take some notes. What I'll do is I'll provide some additional resources maybe in a future video that you can use. But coolers is one. Noun project is one resource. um, Usually when we talk about design, there's also the font pairings, kind of the grid system where you lay things out. So there are a lot of other good resources on that, and again, I can probably provide some additional resources on those. um, Deepak um, wanted to know the future of Tableau as a skill in terms of jobs in the data industry, considering all the recent changes in Salesforce. This is a very interesting question. Again, I'm not a spokesperson for Tableau. I'm not a spokesperson for Salesforce. I am aware of the things that are happening in many of the big tech companies, and it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. However, I think in terms of skill, the way I see it is when we're working with these tools, what we're taking away is more than just the tool. So I would go back to Manuela's question. Manuela's question was, well, how about designing? When we work with Tableau, your skills, the skills that you develop, the knowledge that you develop is not just about Tableau. When I learn about what's a good visual, what's an effective visual, when I learn about communicating my presentations and my data, that is a transferable and a very marketable and a very important skill. So even if you decide to move away from Tableau, or maybe your new organization is not working with Tableau, they're working with Power BI, they're working with the next big tool. I think all of these things that you've learned, being able to communicate with stakeholders, being able to identify, clarify the requirements, being able to deliver something that they require, I think those are the skills that we're all going to learn, regardless of the tool that we use. I think that I view it the same way with programming. If I learn one programming language, what it gives me is a baseline. It gives me a foundation. Once I learn what an if else statement is, I can go to the brand new language. And if they have logic that is also if else statement, I can take that knowledge. I'm not, so it means that you're not starting from scratch. Again, I think this one, the future of Tableaus in terms of skill, what I would probably suggest is when you are going for an interview, and let's say it's an interview for another tool, but you have used Tableau, what you could do is you could highlight first that you've learned the tool, how you've learned the tool, because you're going to take those skills when you go to the interview and now you have to work with another product XYZ. You probably will need to learn that tool. And a lot of times you're also going to need to learn the business and work with their stakeholders. So I think that's probably what I would say. So in terms of putting context into your skills, it's very easy to bucket, I know Tableau. But in all honesty, all of us will learn way more than just Tableau. If you are working, let's say, in healthcare, now you know healthcare analytics. You know all of maybe the restrictions, the constraints. That's a very it's a very valuable skill. If you work in the finance industry, in the banking industry, not everybody knows that skill. So I think in here we really need to emphasize everything else that we know too. Is you're stacking your skill. You basically become a domain expert. You're creating your own niche. And there will be places elsewhere where that skill, that combination of skills, is much needed. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. So thank you so much. I saw this note. Thank you, Nix. I appreciate that. Thank you. So in here, Naveen has a question: how to show column total other using analysis, using calculation, column totals. I think I'm not. I may or may not be answering your question, but for example, I think Naveen's question is if we have column totals. So let's say if we have these, and we have, let's say, sales. Actually, let's put that on text. So I should change this format, default properties and the format, put this into currency, and then let's just say, let's put in year, order date. So how do we add the totals here? The easiest way to add the totals is using the analytics tab, and then you have this option called totals. You can either double click. The double click means it's going to find all possible totals and subtotals and add them. So if I simply double click, it's just going to add whatever it can find. However, if you drag the totals over, you can now choose. So sometimes you might not have subtotals, but sometimes you can have I can select the column grand totals, row grand totals. You can pick those. And Dean, I think you mentioned under analysis, you can also add the totals from here. So under analysis, there's totals, and these are the same options. So I should kind of zoom in here. So under the analysis menu, you have the totals, and you can show the row grand totals, column grand totals. You have the row totals to the left, and then the column totals to the top. I guess another question is, well, what if I didn't want to have that? I think there are options. It's probably not going to be as straightforward. So for example, I could very well create another calculated field that just has maybe a level of detail expression, or maybe a calculated field that has just a total, basically a table calculation function using total. So I think that is also possible. Again, I'm not sure if I'm completely answering your question, but in terms of this, if I wanted to create a calculated field that has the total, so using a table calculation, I could say, so let's just say grand total. But just keep in mind for table calculations that we always are going to be bound by your layouts, your direction, your scope, and then your filters. So these will be affected by that. But if I'm using a table calc, so here I'm going to just type in table calc, I could just say, total sum of sales. That total is a table calculation function. And again, this is something that we can probably work with, but we probably need to do a lot of kind of maybe tweaking. So here, let me just say compute using, let's say, table down. So in here, again, we probably will need to tweak this visual, but using a table calculation, I can still get that grand total for my column. Another option might be your table calculation. So if I create a table calculation right now, so let's say grand total, and this is going to be a table calc, and probably what I'm going to do, so we could also technically do a fixed LOD, or possibly what I want to exclude in here is the year of order date. Let's try and exclude LOD. So if we exclude the year of order date, and then we only look at the sum of sales. I think we're looking at sales here. Let's click on apply. What am I missing? So exclude. Oh, there it already exists, because this one is supposed to be an exclude. Sorry, exclude LOD, and let's say apply. take a look at this. I think they should work too as an option. So exclude LOD. What am I excluding? I'm excluding the year of order date. What else should I exclude? Oh, maybe let's try this. Instead of my year of that, maybe let's try this, because this one is probably a date part. There we go. So again, what I did was initially, because I was only looking at these. So very easy, again, very easy to assume that the way I get that is using the year of order date. But in reality, my view actually has a different field. My view uses this, which is what we call a date part. And it has a very different calculation. That's why initially my calculation did not work. So what I did, again, another power calculated fields, you can drag and drop from your canvas. I basically just took that and then dragged it over, because again, it's a very different field. But again, I'm not sure if this is what Naveen is asking, but here you can see that whether we're using an LOD, an exclude LOD, this could also very well be a fixed LOD, or if you're using a kind of a running total, you can basically get some total or some kind of subtotal. I'm probably just catching up, so I apologize if I miss some of the questions. There is a question. Could you please share some recent projects based on Tableau? And I'm assuming that maybe this is a question for a new video. I'm more than happy to try and mock up some data. So I work with proprietary. Well, I can't disclose kind of the data set, but I could create some sample data set and then recreate some of my projects. Very recently, I have a project where it's more of an exploration project. Again, probably not ideal from a best practices standard. However, this was an extremely helpful tool because it allows us to cut down on the back and forth. So again, I've mentioned earlier, a lot of times you get a request, there's a lot of back and forth. What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? But what we've done with this tool is it's an exploration tool. So a lot of the questions that usually go into the clarification, we've put them as filters or as scenarios. And then just based on that, we give them a big summary, at least give them an overview of how many are we looking at, what number are we looking at. So I've thought about that. I will probably create a video on that, just sharing kind of from start to finish, but using mock-up data. And there is a question on how to prepare for Tableau desktop interviews. Please give some tips and topics. I've mentioned earlier that if I were the employer or if I were the one interviewing, I would be very interested in first how your thought process. If I ask you, if I were the employer, I'll probably ask you an open-ended question. I'll give you a scenario. I work with this. So let's say I work in retail. One of the problems that we are facing is we always run out of raw materials, and then now you have a big big order kind of coming along. Maybe there is an event, there is a holiday where a lot of people just ask for that one item, and we always end up having to back order a lot of these orders from us. How can you help us? So I think for me, if I were the employer, I will give you a question like that, because I'm interested in your thought process. I'm interested in what questions you're going to ask me back. I'm also interested in how you're going to incorporate that when you're working with Tableau. So the way I would suggest answering that is first paraphrase the question. Do you mean this? So just make sure that you have the same understanding. I see that as well. I do interviews as well, but I see that when I see the question very differently sometimes from how you would see the question, because those are always going to be colored by our own experiences. So if you've always worked on the retail environment, maybe you have certain assumptions based on the situations you were at. However, maybe I'm asking a very different question. So at first, I would say paraphrase. Second, I would suggest you you bring your value proposition first in business terms. I can use Tableau so that you will get, you will know ahead of time when you're going to run out of materials, and then qualify that with your very specific Tableau knowledge. You can say, I can create a dashboard. Maybe I will create two different dashboards, one for the sales team and one for the logistics team, maybe one for the shipping team, maybe it's going to be three. And I will make sure that, especially if they have access to Tableau server, that they will get a subscription once a certain threshold is reached. And I will make sure that in the dashboard, it's very clear that you are missing these items, that you're going to isolate that. So again, those are just some ideas. In terms of actual technical skills, what I've seen in the past, so I've been part of other interviews. What I've seen in the past is really just knowing your way around calculations, because chances are you're going to have to create calculations. Knowing what the limitations of Tableau are, what is Tableau for, and what is Tableau not for. So if you are being asked to create a spreadsheet that has 100 columns, um, it's okay to ask the question, and it's okay to push back and say, are there other tools that we're looking at? Because Tableau is very strong at summarizing the data, visualizing the data, sharing it, but maybe not necessarily showing 100,000 different raw numbers. So I think that's okay, because it shows that you're thinking through the issues and potential problems in the future. Um, And I think this is an answer to Manuela. She had a question about design and colors. I absolutely agree. It comes with practice too. We can read as much as we want on best practices, but with design and colors, it's also more on the creative side. And we can be creative. There is one there's one resource, data viz rules. 1 second here. So I actually really appreciate this article. I will I might have mentioned this in one of the last videos, I think in the maybe in the colors video. But I am a big proponent of know what the rules are, know what works, but know why they work, and maybe even more so, know when they could work. So again, we, especially on the creative side, we can follow the rules, but imagine, if the great artists actually followed all the rules, they're gonna create the same kinds of painting. But I think we can give ourselves permission to be creative, especially with Tableau, because there's always a lot of variability. Your audience is different, who you're talking to is different, the language could be different, the one thing that you're focusing on in your presentations could be different. So again, I think with practice and with seeing, I think the breadth of exposure also helps us. If you've seen cases where it works, I think it helps us kind of get a bigger perspective or a bigger view of things. But yes, I definitely appreciate that too. Um, how to prepare for the Tableau Desktop Specialist Certificate exam. Tableau Desktop, let me just look for this. Tableau Desktop Specialist. Exam specialist certification. So I would definitely, again, I would definitely recommend going through the exam prep guide. I know this doesn't seem like it's a lot. It doesn't seem like it's a lot because there's not a lot of sample questions. They do have a lot of links in here. And I know, again, it's not ideal because they don't have kind of the similar questions, but if you have a little bit of time and if you can push yourself a little bit, I would recommend download some data sets. So Kaggle is one. They have a lot of really good data sets. A lot of the cities have open data portals. And let me share with you, let me just see in here. So for example, I am in Vancouver. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. A lot of the cities have what they call an open data portal. So this is as real life as you can get. So you can go to a city's open data portals. I think New York has it, Chicago has it. You can download some of these data sets, and then start asking questions. Again, this is not totally fictional, because if I'm interested in Vancouver, what are the projects that are related to sustainability? What is the budget so far? How many of them have been canceled? How many of them have not been have not been started yet? I think that also gives you a way to practice Tableau. And with the Tableau Desktop Specialist certificate exam, you're going to be tested on some of the terminologies, but there are certain scenarios where you have to imagine that you're working with Tableau. Like, so you could kind of almost have to think of, if I were in Tableau, how do I do this? Because I believe the new desktop specialist certificate exam, you don't get a virtual machine. I don't think you get a virtual machine. I think the analyst exam is the one where you get a virtual machine, but only for a specific section. So in the past, the very, very first certification exams for Tableau, everything had a virtual machine, but now it's a little bit different. So now you're given a multiple choice questions, and they're going to ask you, how do you do this? And it's easier to answer if it's almost like muscle memory. If you can almost feel your hands like dragging and dropping, I think that's going to be helpful. But I would definitely encourage, have a look at the prep guide first. So again, in this prep guide, they will give you the format. Also keep in mind, so again, this is multiple choice. Please be careful of the wording. They will say maybe select the best answer, which means some of the choices may all look right, but you have to kind of think through what is the best case. And also in the questions that you have, so in here it says 45, 40 are scored. There's 5 that's unscored. So I would also encourage you, while you're taking the exam, to put the comments in, especially if you think maybe there could be a different interpretation with that question. I think Tableau reads all of them. And yeah, in here I would just go through these domains, and then go to the online help and kind of look at each one of them. And again, at this time, there are a lot of really good certification, a lot of really good videos. I did one on an older version of Tableau. So again, shameless plug, in my channel, there is a section just on certification. That will probably give you a little bit of an idea, but other channels also have them. And here, thank you, Tony. Interested in building a radial chart? Absolutely. I've been looking at different kinds of charts, also looking at the kind of the roadmap and seeing if Tableau will be supporting new types of charts. But yes, absolutely, radial charts is one. Sunburst charts is another one that's been on my queue for a while. Sankey charts is also another one. So definitely we'll consider this. In here, we have how to clear the filter along with going back to the home page with a single click. I have recently done this in one of my most recent projects. I've mentioned that I have so many filters in that project, so it is impossible to even know which filters they've selected. What I'll do, I'll make some notes. I'll try to put that as a kind of as a next video, if any of you will find that helpful. But there are a few steps, and it does require. I remember that one of the limitations is you need to make sure that your filters are not set to the data source level. So this is, I'm not sure why, but it means that any of your filters, you basically have to choose. Let me just kind of quickly go back and just quickly demonstrate this. So if, for example, we have a filter, let's say on category, a lot of times when I have filters, when I have multiple worksheets, I would set a lot of these filters to all using the same data source, because I want this to be kind of uniform across my dashboards. But for a clear all filter, one of the limitations and kind of extra work on our end is all the filters that you have that you want to clear in one click. They have to be set to selected worksheets. I don't know if it's changed lately, but that's what I had to do. So I'll I'll put that as a note. So clear all filters. I'll try to queue that up as a second video. Thank you. Let's take a look here. What would you recommend? Would your recommendation be in terms of what calculated field, LOD measure to be done by end users, and what to be done by IT and the BI team? That's a good question. So in my experience, Tableau is a very good tool for the end users. When we're saying end users, probably the people who are kind of the domain experts in the business. They're the sales managers. They are the people in marketing. I think the answer to this question is it varies and it depends on your organization. I think it also depends on the people that you're working with, because I think it's kind of a gray area. Some organizations will have an IT or a BI team because they solely depend on them on tasks that might take them away from their core functions. So, for example, if I have a team of marketers and what they need to do is look for prospective clients, and that's the most valuable use of their time. So, in that case, maybe for that organization, they might offload this work, maybe a lot of the Tableau work, to you. And there might also be a bit of training involved. It depends on how comfortable they are with the tool, with Tableau. But I think it depends. You also have some organizations and some groups of stakeholders where they're like, they're ready to try. They're ready to learn a few of these things, because one of the challenges for us as data professionals, and I can speak from my own experience, one of the jobs that I had a long time ago was I was a report developer. But a report developer means I know how to write queries. I know my background is on SQL. I know SQL. I know how to work with, at that time, it's reporting services, SQL Server reporting services. I know how to do that, but I don't know the business. So it's either they teach me the business, or I'm going to have to ask them to be a little bit more technical. So I think for this question, I would recommend, if you have the opportunity, is to ask, to have a conversation, because sometimes maybe it's also something that's technical sometimes can also be very intimidating. If I ask you to learn something that you are not aware of, you've never seen this before, maybe you feel like you're not technically savvy. Sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down with one person, maybe a representative, kind of a champion. You have a trainer. Once they see the power, and how much it cuts down on the queue or the wait time, they may be open to learning these calculations themselves. So I don't think there's that, again, a lot of what I'm saying is my personal opinion. I think it is a conversation. I definitely would reach out to them first, and maybe even demonstrate. And if they're comfortable, and you can develop a partnership too, and a collaboration. So it's not like I'm handing off the ball to you and that's it. That's your responsibility. What we can also do is a more collaboration. Hey, we can partner with you. Maybe in the beginning, the IT and the BI team does this more, but as they're more comfortable, again, they can do some of these themselves, because it cuts down on the wait time, especially if you have a long project queue. Let me see here. How to filter dashboards by another chart. So the issue is, let me just see here. I use relations to combine different database tables into one data source and place the charts based on different parts of this one data source on one dashboard, and then enable filters through. I'm just gonna read the rest. So in here, filters through, and then enable filters through the icon and the right top side, but the filter doesn't work. Sometimes what happens, I think there's a few things. Usually, if you have multiple data sources, you may need to enable this piece. So apply to worksheets using related data sources. But that's not perfect. Sometimes what we need to do is maybe create a parameter, that can be used as a filter. Again, there are different ways around it. One one thing that people that one strategy, again, you want to use a chart, but it depends on what that chart is. But that chart could feed into a parameter. So for example, in here, if we create a parameter, let's just say, this is my, let's say, my segment type. Maybe it's a series of values, string. Let's say, A, B, C. Okay. So what this could do is technically help you when you're filtering through the different charts, regardless of which data source they come from. Again, there's probably a lot more to this scenario, but that's one that I would probably consider. So we've had situations like this where we have multiple data sources, and we have to filter each one of them. But we probably need to walk through exactly what needs to be filtered. And it also requires, I think one of the challenges with this is sometimes the filters are easier because they're already preset up. You can change the form. You can set them up to apply to everything that kind of affects them. The parameters are a little bit different. One of the limitations that I encounter is with the parameters, I cannot select multiple. So again, you have to kind of work around that. So usually what happens is you have a brand new worksheet and you can kind of do the multi-select through a worksheet, but not through the form, because your parameters, again, they only have these options. It's not as rich as an actual native filter. This one, thank you, Rabs. Yes, I would definitely have that. I was looking through how I could do a demonstration for the performance. Also, maybe troubleshooting. One other video I was looking at for a while now, but this might be more of a limited view, is I was always curious as to what goes back into my database, because many of my data sources are SQL Server or MySQL. So I'm always curious, like what query kind of goes back whenever I create or my charts. So it's something that's definitely on my queue. How is the market for Tableau today? What is the effect of the recession on Tableau-related job market? Thank you for also clarifying from my opinion. I've mentioned earlier, with we're all aware of the news from many companies. So from Salesforce, from Microsoft, from Amazon, from Google. What is the effect of the recession? I think it is. I'm not, again, I can't speak in general, but let's say in Vancouver, where I am, in the areas where I am, I know there are a lot of organizations that are working with Tableau. So that's not going to go away anytime soon. So if anything, I would probably anticipate that people who, let's just say, people from Salesforce who have unfortunately left Salesforce, I would assume that the organizations in the past that used to consult maybe with Salesforce, they would be more than happy to take a lot of these very valuable skills in-house. So again, that I would like to see that there's a lot of positive as well. Another thing that I've mentioned earlier is, we try to, sometimes we bucket ourselves to very specific tools. I know Tableau, but we do know beyond just the tool. I look at people in human resources, like people who have done HR analytics, people who've done game analytics. Their skill set is not just based on the one tool that they've used, but it's also on the combination of tools. That's your niche. That's how valuable you are. So I think when targeting maybe the next, when targeting the next company or organization, or maybe even, if you're interested in becoming your own entrepreneur, then this is something that you can market to those group of companies. And again, I think I am going to be missing a few of these comments, so I apologize. So um, thank you, Peter. And I would like to say thank you to Peter. Peter, you have always, my very first video, I know Peter is one of the first who's always been supporting me. So I just want to say very, very sincerely, thank you. I really appreciate a lot of the positive comments. I think one thing is creating a lot of the YouTube videos. They take a lot of time. So and sometimes I kind of look back, I edit, I spend so much time on the editing just because I'm not very savvy on that part of the video creation process, but all the comments are what keeps me going, so it's kind of like my high for the day. So thank you so much. um oh no, I guess my video is breaking, my network is breaking. Oh no, I guess I'm just seeing some of these. Ah, oh, that is unfortunate. So I guess I've been talking for a really long time, and it seems like the video has lagged. Hmm. So my apologies. I will definitely look into the chat next time. Um, and what I'll do is I'll try to re-upload or re-record the video. So I am so sorry. So thank you. Yep, I think this is absolutely right. I am just kind of trying to look at the chat right now, and I apologize. I'm a live stream newbie, so thank you. Uh, well, I again, it's past 10 o'clock. It's been an hour. I was really scheduling this just for an hour. Um, I definitely appreciate your time. I have seen the chat just now, and I will definitely I'll take a look at the recording that was done, and I will make sure to check the the recording. So if it's still probably very laggy, I'll definitely check the recording. So I just want to say thank you. There were quite a few questions that came, so I apologize if I was not able to answer any of the questions. That's it for now. Thank you so much. I guess realizing that there has been some issues on the connection, I'll definitely look into this so that the next live Q and A's are not as not as frustrating. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much. I'll hang around for the next few minutes, but thank you. Thank you so much.